Afternoon, everyone. Tough slot being in the middle of the afternoon. Try the end of the afternoon, Dave, thanks. Hopefully people are still awake and can hear me well. But very conscious what I've put in my slides. Tell a joke. What I've put in my slides has probably been covered largely by others on the stage this afternoon already, which on one hand I was a little bit wary of coming into the afternoon, but on the other hand, having reflected on the perspectives that people are coming at with the same topics, it's actually quite reassuring, and hopefully as I go through the slides that'll make sense. Just very briefly about myself, I've been with North Star just over 4 years now. I was deep sea prior to that as a deck officer, and then I went into offshore wind with one of the turbine OEMs. So I've sort of seen walk-to-work operations come from a concept of logistics use in offshore wind through to now what is effectively day-to-day and routine operations. And it's sometimes easy, I think, to forget that what we now see as routine with offshore wind and the use of gangways is actually gangways aren't established technology, as we've heard already. They're evolving in terms of their capability and functionality, and it's something we need to be mindful of, that yes, we're using it day to day, but actually this is still an evolving technology and an evolving set of standards, and that's very much what we want to focus on today. So I'm going to walk through just a very light touch. I'm not the gangway expert in the company. We do have more than me, but I will hold my hands up and say, like Dave, we've learned a lot over the last few years of operation. So I'm going to try and step through a lot of those learnings. You might have questions that I can and can't answer, but I'm more than happy to take them away if needs be as well. But hopefully just gives a bit of an insight into where we're at, what we've learned, and what we think needs to happen next. So I've started Googling, or Gemini AI, various topics to see how good it is recently, and I put walk to work in, and it told me it was the alternative to using a car or a bus, and I put us under the other transportation bracket. But yeah, weirdly, I was across at a walk to work seminar yesterday, actually, in Rotterdam, so coincidental in terms of scheduling, but quite hectic in terms of travel. And the slogan for the company is as easy as crossing the street, and it made me think back to the Google definition of walking to work and buses and cars. But then I thought to myself yesterday, is actually how easy is crossing the street? Do we think about it? Do we just walk across blindly? Or are there crossings, are there bridges, are there walkways and zebra crossings and traffic lights? And all of a sudden I was thinking, it's quite a complex thing, crossing the street. So keep that analogy in mind as I go through as well, because actually there's a lot to draw on when we say it's as easy as crossing the street, but there's a lot behind that. It'd be very easy for me to lean on our statistics to date. Like I say, we've been in operation over the course of 2.5 years now, but with several vessels. We built up 7+ years of operation across the fleet. We haven't had any man overboards. We've got 40,000 transfers under our belt, and it would be very easy for me to sit here and say, it's going great. What's the problem? But, as I'm sure Paul would say, and anyone from health and safety would say, you're only as good as your next transfer, right? Or you're only as good as the next operation. So, whilst that's great, fantastic marketing material, it's not really what's going to help me do the job safely tomorrow and make sure people get their work safely tomorrow. So, therein, what's the problem? So, we're looking at transferring people, getting people from one asset to another, floating to fixed, floating to floating perhaps in the future. We focus as companies, I think, as vessel operators, as wind farm operators, we focus on the operational element of safety and keeping things aloft. We focus on the elements that we can control day to day. So, procedural elements, testing, the maintenance that we can do on the gangways, the PPE that the teams wear, the inductions. But a lot of the conversation, a lot of the statements from the health and safety executive, the various industry bodies, I've put up a quote from the latest HSE notice there around the auto retraction, which I'll reflect on in a bit more detail shortly. It makes you think a little bit beforehand in terms of the design and the control elements in the design. And I know Jim touched on a lot of it, and I don't want to say largely stole my thunder, because of the perspective it was from was fantastic to look at it from a different angle. And genuinely, there's a conversation I think I need to have with you at the end of it, which is, you know, great. If anything comes from today, that would be my big win. But the questions are being asked around that side of not just the day-to-day, but what came before that. How do we know it's inherently safe by design, right? And again, back to the analogy, so which street is it you're crossing? Is it a one-way? Is it a motorway? Is there a crossing in place? And what does that look like, you know? These are the things where defined standards come into play and give you that opportunity. Jeez, I'm losing the room, One standard that exists, there are other standards. DNV is a prominent one, of course, and talks specifically about the type of gangway. There's a couple of types of gangways depending on your operation and the profile of it. The ones we use are type 2 gangways. So the definition focuses around a controlled flow of people and routine transfer, where the gangway is monitored actively. There is somebody sat in the chair of control being able to monitor and actively take control of the system, as opposed to a type 1, which is a more passive, you know, natural flow of people, not necessarily 24/7 monitored, and tends to be connected for a longer period of time as well. And then specifically on the APS, the retraction side of things, again, looking at that evolution of gangways, not all gangways have APS systems installed and programmed within them. And not necessarily gangways, but the bring-to-work systems that was mentioned also. So an easy answer to this is switch off the APS. You can still operate under a DNV standard and you don't have an APS, but does that really make it safer? My guess is no, but it's an option. Specifically then, I've debadged, as Jim said as well. I don't want to focus on specific manufacturers, but I do really want to highlight in this presentation the difference in interpretation of standard, or interpretation within the standard, where you have one gangway. I'll try not to go down a rabbit hole here because I confuse myself trying to explain this sometimes. Gangway 1 has an APS fitted, has a delay of 10 seconds when the system is triggered before that the retraction takes place. The same gangway has full redundancy of those safety critical components. But the APS triggers after the first component failure in that redundant layer. So you have two slewing motors. If one slewing motor fails, APS is triggered and you have 10 seconds. But you can override it, and then you can override it again. So it's not 10 seconds finite, there's 17 seconds or 27 seconds, whatever it might be. Gangway 2 has an APS delay of 1 second. So this is the other end of the scale of that immediate retraction risk, as Paul outlined. There are two components in the system that have a single point failure, so there's no redundancy in that system. But the APS trigger within the programming does not trigger on the first failure of redundant systems, it triggers on the final failure within a system. So on those two components, it will trigger. But where there is redundancy, it will not trigger until the second component or the third component will fail. And on either side, like I say, you can delay it on gangway 1, gangway 2 can be manually stopped, so you can intervene to prevent that retraction, if you can do it in time. Question 1 is the obvious question, is, well, which one's safer? Both are operating and designed under the DNV standard. But my fundamental question underneath this is, why are they different? They're doing the same thing, they're protecting the same thing, they're controlling the same risk, but they're doing it differently. And fundamentally, it affects the end user, it affects the operator and the transferee. So why? Why is it different? Let me jump to the next one. So without going into the detail of the topic, the same question can be asked on the traffic lights and the alarms on the gangways. They're different types of lights. Ewan was just showing me strip lights down a gangway now, of lighting it up like a Christmas tree. Why not? If it makes it blindingly obvious that it's green and safe or red and not, why wouldn't you do that? But it's not prescribed in such a manner. So the volume of the alarms, the tone of the alarms themselves, if you think about it, with a ship's general alarm and a fire alarm, are very distinctively different. Is that the case standardized across different gangways? No. Training schemes for the operators. So again, selfishly, as the ship owner and operator, then we're looking at the competence profile of the people operating the gangway. At the moment, that is heavily led by the OEMs of the gangways, and in some instances, it's fantastic. Yesterday, like I say, I was at a facility, a full simulator. They can put all sorts of wind. They have a wind farm there. It is a gangway chair in front of a computer screen. They have their own games designers who are modeling this and building it up. It's a fantastic bit of kit. But I noticed in amongst all of that weirdly, the telescoping section, so they have two joysticks generally, and the telescoping of the gangway is controlled by sideways movement of the joystick, which is unlike every other gangway, which is forwards and backwards movement for the telescoping. And I thought, bloody hell, here we go again. There's another one that I should have had on my slides, but they're both DNV standard. The other bit about the training schemes is the level does vary. I mean, Jim, you mentioned, I think you say 9 gangway operator or gangway types. Was it Paul that mentioned gangway types manufacturers now, potentially 9 of them more coming to the market? Are we expecting all of them to have a robust academy set up that ensures competence of our operators? Or do we need to look more into a view of the sort of stage 2, stage 3 industry standard? But to be able to do that, you need the gangways to all fundamentally operate the same, like a crane does when you go to a crane and a stage 3 operator. There's a familiarization piece with the individual bit of kit that absolutely needs to take place, but the fundamentals of the safe design and operation of that bit of kit are the same, right? Another one, the TP interface, so where the gangway actually makes connection. And I mean, I'm being selfish again, the TP interface from an offshore wind, but the elephant's foot was mentioned earlier for oil and gas installations going over the railing. Same scenario, but standardization of these connection points is a real challenge, particularly on legacy wind farms where they weren't necessarily built and designed with SOV and walk-to-work operations in mind. So sometimes you're pushing on and there's a catcher plate under the gangway which is applying upward force to be able to hold on and maintain the connection. Other times there's a very specific UPN beam that you sit within. Sometimes it's capped at the end, sometimes it's not. What's it coated with? Is it anti-friction? Is it increased friction? How well is it maintained? So that side of things absolutely needs improvement as well. And reflecting on the gangway part, there is the interface of the tip. So what does the end of the gangway look like? What's that rubber compound? And again, how does that vary? But it effectively all fall under the same standard. And then, as Dave mentioned, around the human factors procedures as well, not just the transferee procedures, but the operator procedures in the event of emergency or routine is critical, but particularly for the transferee in terms of the actions they take in the event of. So do they know the alarms? Do they understand how much time they have? And if they go to a different gangway, is it the same thing they're supposed to do? And at the moment, I don't have comfort in that personally. There are multiple wind farms, particularly during the construction side of things, where you have several different gangways in operation. Do they all have the same standard induction? Do they all have the same procedures in case of emergency? And then, can you be sure that a technician who sailed out on one vessel, deployed to an asset and is collected by another vessel, has taken the induction on the gangway that they're about to transfer on? Or can you rest assured that the one they've done was enough for the next one they're on? Another point, again, drawing on what Dave has said in terms of the journey so far. Similarly, I don't know if I'm as old as you, Dave, I sometimes feel it. But I've been here a little while now in offshore wind, and I've definitely seen improvement from where it started to where it is today. And I think we need to not lose sight of that fact as well. There's a hell of a big journey to go, as Dave outlined, but we have come a long way. The idea that there are specific gates and possibilities now for pushing on in and pre-designed in wind farms. Dogger Bank, for example, has 6 gates around the TP specifically for allowing further accessibility and improving safety of that accessibility through the course of the year and conditions. Gangways themselves, there's a massive amount of innovation. That was the theme of the day yesterday in Rotterdam, around innovation. And largely, this is all to do with improving the user experience and making it a safer operation. And we shouldn't lose sight of the effort that goes in. And yes, it is around machine safety as well, but fundamentally, these things are here to provide safe access. That is their primary function. So we don't lose sight of that element, but that doesn't mean we can take it for granted that there isn't any work to do either. But it is, it's reassuring to have heard earlier as well around the mention of inductions and briefings and physical demos on certain sites. That's absolutely something we've done as well. So there's videos that the guys have to watch when they go on the vessel, but they go and speak to the gangway operator. The gangway operator presses the alarm. He shows them the green and red light. They get to view a drift-off scenario, so they see what the gangway physically does in those scenarios before they even need to transfer. But that's not standard. We've done that because we thought it was a good idea. You guys have done that because you thought it was a good idea. But where's the standardization there that we need to pull together? And this is my call to action, which has been used a hell of a lot over the course of the afternoon. But that's the fundamentals for me, is what do we need to do now? Well, there's two elements for me. There's two stages to it. One is deal with what we've got. And again, I didn't put it in specifically, but I have plan, do, check, act written down in my notes, because that is where we are. And we need to make sure when we do that, we factor in the current design capabilities and limitations of those gangways. So we have to accept there is going to be variation today, but we still have to acknowledge that variation. We have to manage it. The biggest thing I would say from Paul is acknowledging and assessing that risk that you hold today. The second part is the call to action, is the fact that a lot of us have this experience now with individual vessel operators, wind farm operators, wind farms around the countries. We have a responsibility collectively to come together, whether that is through MSF, through GOMO, through IMCA, through G+. I personally don't care. The point is we need to come together. We really need to share this stuff. And I think probably that's where I'm at. Like I say, there's been a lot of overlap this afternoon. We've had 4 different perspectives, but we've all came to the same conclusions, and it's incredibly reassuring that there's enough people with the right frame of mind pointing in the right direction. But we just need to do it together. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. One. Yeah. Any questions for Steve? Well, I've got him here on the stage.
That's fine.
That's fine.
You can go home now.
There we go, sir.
Thank you very much.
To the question.
Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.